Open hip, closed hip. Hey, welcome back to your virtual yoga studio with me. I'm Tarish. I'm so glad you're here today for the topic that I don't know about you, but was a little confusing, as most things I'm sharing in the beginning of my yoga journey. I'm going to talk about an open hip and a closed hip. Open hip, closed hip. If you hear the teacher say that while you're practicing yoga, what does that mean? What does it look like? Why do we do it? I'll start with downward facing dog as the starting point because that to me is the most common and regular place where teachers will give an option, or you'll see different people in the class that you might be taking having an open hip or a closed hip. Let me demonstrate. I'll start from a downward facing dog. In the downward facing dog, I will demonstrate first a closed hip. Lifting the right leg, keeping the hip closed, meaning that my hips are square, both hip bones are facing down on the yoga mat. Look at the difference here. When I go open hip, I roll the right hip open. This is an open hip. You can point the toe, bend the knee. Open hip, closed hip. Open hip, closed hip. Couple of the different purposes and feelings for that. So in a closed hip, I'm feeling a lot more integration in the core required there. Strengthening, pressing the right heel back toward the wall behind me. It's actually a lot more challenging in my body, in my practice, to keep a square hip. From the downward facing dog, lifting the right leg, keeping a square hip, I have a lot of core engagement here. Holding the right leg at a square hip level requires extreme strengthening and engagement of the core and the right leg. That is going to be different for each person because if I open the hip, that might be more challenging to someone else. Again, we're all going to look and feel very differently in our yoga practice because our bodies have been through different experiences. We all have different backgrounds. Just remember that yoga is not a place to compare yourself to someone. We can all learn from each other, especially if you're in a studio class or a class with more than one person. You can learn from your teacher, you can learn from me, but I really love to emphasize to you that the practice is very individualized based on your skeletal structure. We all have the same bones, but they're not placed together exactly the same way. Yoga, when practiced correctly, it's not about getting to a certain end point in your body. It's about using your body as a tool for awareness, to be present in the moment with your breathing. That is the goal. To give you some freedom in your practice because again, it's all about self-exploration. You will notice when you want to give up. You will notice when you are out of breath. You will notice when you find a place that there is resistance. It's amazing because you're creating this phenomenal self-awareness. Sorry, I went off a little bit on a tangent. I love yoga. I love what it's done for me, and I love sharing it with you. Let's move on to another place that you might see the option for an open or closed hip. An open hip from a forward fold, lifting the leg, so like a standing L shape. A standing L, you have square hips. So heel is pressing back, right hip is in line or hopefully in line with the left. Belly button is up and in. This is a very challenging place to be for me. It may be easy for you. I'm feeling a long lengthening and strengthening up the very back of the left leg. Watch this. If I open my hip up, it creates a whole nother pose. Hip is open. I can take the leg high. Now the stretch is taken out of the back of the leg and it's more into the inner thigh. I can take my leg up higher, but I've lost the integrity of the engagement. Stretch is very different. So that's just two examples of an open and closed hip in a pose. It really depends on what the end goal that you're being taught there is. And I want you to think about in your practice when you're given the options for square hips and down dog or opening the hip, stacking the hip. Notice the difference in how you feel in a square hips downward facing dog or an open hip downward facing dog. And also like a standing split or a standing L. Notice the difference. So if you start from a standing L shape, standing leg feels a certain way, the core is engaged a certain way, you're feeling the opening and stretching and the strengthening. And then notice how you feel when you open the hip, what the challenges are in that particular way of moving the body. Another thing I love about the yoga practice is that there is never-ending possibilities of awareness and growth and strength and opening. We're really creating this strong foundation of myofascial connective lines in your body. There's an old joke, you know, I've fallen and I can't get up when it comes to old people. And I think that if you incorporate yoga and this practice into your life, that's really not going to be the case for you. You're going to create a really strong structure that's going to support you through the years. The other day in my practice, open and closed hip example, I'll do it facing the camera, and it's a standing bow. So my left arm, I'll reach my left arm high, right hand to the side, bending the knee, grabbing the right foot. So my hips are square to you right now in the camera. And I'm going to kick into the hand, keeping square hips. My right hip is in line with the left hip. Now watch this. This is square hips. I'm in a back bend here. If I roll the hip open, I can take the leg higher and have a different expression, but I really lost the integrity of the back bend there. So when my hips are facing you, I'm in a very intense back bend, opening the right shoulder really well. And I'm really creating a lot of strength and stability in the standing leg. And then when I open the hip, there's not that there's anything wrong with either place, but it's a different opening, it's a different integrity in the standing leg, also in the shoulder and in the opening in the hip area. So there's 3 examples: downward facing dog, standing L and standing split, or standing bow or dancer. Those are 3 spots where you have variations of closed and open hips. I hope you've enjoyed this video half as much as I've enjoyed making it for you. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video, tutorial, or the next yoga class that's posted here on this page. I will see you soon.